Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Addie and today we are doing my top books of 2024 video. All of these books I love so dearly, and I found some really great books in 2024. Was 2024 my best year in reading? No, but it was an explorative year in reading. I found new genres that I enjoy. I dived really deep into my fantasy era, and I think my reading taste really evolved this year into more mature literature, stepping more into adult high fantasy, stepping more into literary fiction a teeny bit, but mostly fantasy. And I think my love for romance is always there. It's always going to be there, and it holds such a dear place in my heart. But like, I think I'm growing, my tastes are expanding beyond just romance this year. So I think from what I learned about myself this year will form an amazing reading year for 2025. With all that being said, I did find some great books this year through my changing tastes and all that, and I'm very excited to share them with you. So I have, I think, around 15 books. I love all of these very dearly. I ranked them. They are in order of how much I love them and how much I liked them. They all, I think, are all 5 stars though. Ranking them was really hard. It took me a while. And then the last 4, 3 of them are honorary mentions for first place, and then I have my first place. It took a lot of contemplation and a lot of really deep thinking, and honestly I'm not even sure. It was really tight, the top 4 for what was number 1, but I'm pretty confident with my answer. So let's just get on into it. I'll start off by Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. I read this in my 24-hour readathon and I flew through it. I have not had this much fun in a YA fantasy romance in a really long time. I feel like a lot of them are very cut and paste now, and as this one did have tropes and things that I could see were like other books, this one really just stood out to me. Like, this one just did it the best, you know? It was super fast paced. I loved the characters. The romance was eating. I think the premise was just really fun. So it's basically about this girl Rune, who is a witch, and then Gideon, who is a witch hunter, and they have this cat and mouse thing going on. He doesn't know that she's a witch. She knows that he's a witch hunter, and they hate each other in real life. And obviously they hate each other because he hates her being a witch, but he doesn't know she's a witch. So all around, it really is a true enemies to lovers, and I am so excited for Rebel Witch, and I just haven't had this much fun in a book in a really long time. That is why it has made it onto this list. I just look back and I'm like, wow, this was just such a fun time reading it. The next book for my top books is A Dangerous Collaboration by Dana Raybourn. I have fallen in love with the Veronica Speedwell series this year. I have adored every book that I've read, but none of them were able to just get into that 5-star range, except this one. This one was so good. It's the 4th book in the series, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but the Veronica Speedwell series, it has 9 books out so far, and it's 1800s Victorian London, and Veronica Speedwell is very eccentric, very much an anomaly for this time period. She studies butterflies, doesn't want to get married or have kids. Basically, she meets this guy Stoker when her aunts die, and they spend 9 books solving mysteries together and falling in love very slowly, I might add. Books slowly. We were finally getting some crumbs in here. I think I really like this one because each one follows a different mystery, and this one was I was loving the coastal town vibes of it. I was really connected to the characters around the mystery. I just feel like this one was probably the best done out of all of them. I need to continue the series. Also, this one was a murder mystery, and I tend to like the murder mysteries the best. The 3rd one was an Egyptian tomb was stolen or something, which was fun, but I tend to like the murder mysteries. The next book I have is a romance. It is Abby Jimenez's Just for the Summer. When I thought I was falling off the romance genre, Abby Jimenez comes in and proves me wrong that I can never really be done with it, because chef's kiss. This book was phenomenal. Probably, I don't know if I liked it as much as Yours Truly. Definitely, they're probably tied. I love the interconnected standalone series that this is in, and I just think that her men that she writes are just so good. his small acts of kindness and the way he just understood her was phenomenal, and I just love her books. This was so good. So basically this book is about this girl, and she believes that she is cursed because every guy that she dates finds the one after they break up. And then she finds this guy on Reddit who's kind of having the same issue. And they're like, well, if we date each other, maybe it'll break the curse and we'll both find the one afterwards. And as they spend time together, they start to catch real feelings for each other, and their like life situations just aren't compatible, but they're very compatible. It's just, I love her books because like it's not like a miscommunication trope at the end. It's like real life problems, and like also this one brings in characters from the other ones, and you start to get like some connections of like who's related to who and who's connected to who, which was really fun. And so I definitely recommend, if you're going to go into this, read from start to this one. I usually don't care for interconnected standalones, but for this I feel like it was just kind of fun seeing how all the characters connect, so definitely check the series out. It's phenomenal. Every book is phenomenal in the series. The next book that I added was a huge surprise to me. This one really shocked me how much I loved it, because I randomly picked it up at Barnes because like I liked the first sentence of it, and then I read it in like a night because I couldn't stop reading it. And that is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer, I think is how you say his name. This is kind of a psychological horror, I would say. This book, I don't read a ton of horror. I read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is like sci-fi horror, and that, I will say, almost made it into this list. Just by a hair, it did it, okay? Like, I loved that book as well, which I totally recommend it. Also, so I thought I really loved that book, so let me read another horror book, and I haven't read one in a while, so I picked up We Used to Live Here. And guys, I think horror might be a genre I need to explore way more in 2025 because it blew me out of the water. I think this is my style of horror as well. It's basically about this girl Eve who lives with her girlfriend Charlie. They move into this house and she's alone, and this family comes up, and the dad's like, hey, like, I used to live here, like, can I show my family around? And she really doesn't want to let like this strange family into her home, but she's like feeling a little like put on the spot, so she's like, all right, like, I guess, like, come on in. And the second they step in the house, like, weird things start going on, and they're not particularly keen on leaving very quickly. When I say, like, I could not put it down, I could not. Like, I put it down to eat, and while I was eating, I was thinking about this book. If you want just like a fun, like a fast-paced like horror thriller that's gonna keep you on your toes, this is it, because it had me guessing the entire time. Wherever you think it's gonna go, it's not gonna go there. Like, I was shocked by the ending. Marcus Kluwer's mind is genius for coming up with this, and honestly it's pretty short. I like wanted more, which is very rare for me out of books. I rarely am finished and I'm like, oh, I wish I got more of that, and this was one where I'm like, give me more. And this is his debut novel, and I'm very curious to see what else he writes in the future, because going off this was phenomenal. So the next book, I think I left it at my apartment at school, so I do not have it, but I wanted to include it. It is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. If you guys don't know, I have started reading the Harry Potter series for the first time as a 21-year-old, and I have been having, honestly, a really fun time. The first and second one, I was like, going a little slow. The third one was like, okay, like, maybe I could be into this. The fourth one grabbed me. The fourth one hooked me in, and I'm officially, I guess, going through a Harry Potter phase as an adult, so that's kind of embarrassing, I guess, but you know, I don't care. I'm having a phenomenal time. I feel like this one was by far the best book in the series, and I'm excited to read the next three. And I don't want to go too much into it, and like, especially because like you guys know what Harry Potter is, like, I just wanted to include it because I rated this 5 stars. I was not expecting to like Harry Potter as much as I did. I was like, okay, like, I'm reading it just to like know the lore and stuff, like I'm just gonna get through the series, but then I got this and I'm like, oh, like, I'm in this series, like, I love this series. And now I officially can say I get the hype, I understand the hype, and I respect the hype. The next book I have is, I yapped about this for so long in the summer, I don't think it's gonna come as a shock, and it is Strength the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is one of those books this year, like, as I said, this year very much evolved my reading taste, and this is one of those books this year where I like really felt like a shift. I was like, oh, okay, like, this is what I want, this is what I love out of a book. The lyrical, beautiful writing, guys, in here, I have so many like annotations and underlines in here, was phenomenal. This is one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read in my entire life, and I don't put that lightly. Also, I just remember just loving the main character in this. His name is Laszlo. He is the sweetest man in the world. Like, what I really enjoy out of a fantasy book especially one that centers around a male-centered main character, is I loved that he was just kind throughout the entire book. And I feel like we're so used, especially with males in fantasy, the rough, like ruthless, you know, kind of vibe of a man, which is great, and I love reading about that as well. But just seeing how he was led by kindness the entire time, I enjoyed that so immensely. And like, he was one of those characters that like made me want to be a better person because he was just so kind always. It was also just such an interesting concept. It's basically this guy, Laszlo Strange. He's a war orphan and just like a junior librarian living his day, but he's obsessed with this like lost city of Weep, but like no one remembers it, like except him, and like does so much research on it, and he's trying so hard to like become knowledgeable about Weep. He has such an interest in it. It's a lost city, no one knows what happens to it, but like he's so convinced that it exists, so he puts all of his effort into researching and finding out what happened to Weep. And then one day a very special opportunity presents itself, and the Godslayer comes in from Weep and is like, he's coming for like some legendary warriors. He wants people to help him like bring back Weep. And Laszlo's like, this is my opportunity, but he is not a warrior, he's a librarian. But then he dazzles them with his intellect on Weep, and he goes on a fabulous adventure to go save and discover the city of Weep. And so good. I couldn't recommend this book enough. I just adored it. It was a very interesting concept, and I'd never read anything like it or something as beautifully written as it. The next book that I loved in 2025 was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This was definitely out of my comfort zone. I do not read a lot of literary fiction. I was really nervous to read this, but I had it assigned to me for a class, and I was like, okay, this is my chance. And as you can see, I did so many annotations for it. It was very thoroughly loved. I wasn't expecting to like this book as much as I did. It follows these college students trying to form video games together, and it's basically just their journey making video games together throughout like their entire lives. I just really enjoyed watching all of them evolve with each other and away from each other as well during like which phase of life they were in. I really liked the like mental health representations in here. I also read this for a class that centered around race, equity, and diversity. That is like what I was looking for and reading for, and I feel like there's a lot to learn in this book about becoming more culturally aware, just aware of a lot of systems put in place, especially around women and minorities in video games, which was a field that I never would have thought about, but I found myself being able to relate to it in a lot of ways, and I just absolutely loved it. And if you want a book that will definitely step you out of your comfort zone, I'm not a huge gamer, but I learned a lot about a different field which I never would have learned about, and if you want a book that will like really make you think, this is the one for you. So the next book, I also somehow in my move I lost a couple books. They're somewhere around here, I just don't know where they are. The next book that I have is A Funny Story by Emily Henry. I'm gonna say this right now, if Emily Henry writes a book, it will be in my favorite books at the end of the year. That's just how it goes, really, almost every year. This book was so phenomenal as well. I really love how Emily Henry, like, she does a romance, but there's also a lot of women's literature in it, and I didn't love this one as much as I loved Happy Place. Happy Place still reigns supreme for me in my heart, but this one was pretty up there. It was good. I really liked the main character. It's basically about this girl Daphne, and she's a children's librarian, and I'm an elementary ed major, so I kind of like liked reading about someone who works with children. Basically, she's been with this guy. He's very wealthy, and he has a girl best friend. It's always the girl best friend, and they're engaged, and he leaves her for his girl best friend, and the house, everything is in his name, and he's like, well, you gotta figure out a place. But luckily the girl best friend also had a boyfriend at the time. Lovely people. So her ex and Daphne move in together. They then kind of fake date to get back at them. But I really liked in this book how the fake dating didn't feel forced. Like, it made sense. They were both invited to their wedding, which was weird, and they're like, well, let's show up to this wedding together, and that kind of made sense. Like, they did them very dirty. It made sense to why they were fake dating. I also really liked how this was like a slow progression. Like, she didn't get into the apartment and was like automatically like, oh, like, I need this man right now. They were both dealing with very long-term breakups, and they were able to lean on each other through a friendship before like developing romantic feelings for each other, and they kind of helped each other heal first, and I adored that. The romance was perfectly written, and I loved this book. I'm so excited for her next release in 2025. To catch my 2025 favorite book video being her next book from this year. It just happens every year. So my next book that I have is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This book was not my favorite Brandon Sanderson book that I've read in my Sanderson journey for 2024, but this was the book that got me into Sanderson. I will say, like, I never looked back since. I loved this book so much, and it was one of those books this year that like really shifted kind of my view on my reading taste. I just adored this book. Like, it's a heist book pretty much, which I love, and it's about this girl Vin, who is just kind of a teenage like street urchin, but she gets recruited by these band of criminals to overthrow like the Lord Ruler because they found out that she has very special abilities that a street urchin probably should not have. I adored this book. If you want to get into Brandon Sanderson, I think this one is a phenomenal choice to start you off. Next book that I have is, it was just a no-brainer, is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This one, I had a goal to like read one classic this year. I don't know if this is cheating because it's a modern classic. I don't care. If it's assigned an English class, it's a classic. I don't know. I counted it. But I loved this book. I'm so glad I read it, despite if it's a classic or not. I don't know. Nothing has made me like rethink my existence as a woman in this country. It was just so frightening, but also so well written. It was a weird feeling, and I don't know how to explain it. But the one thing too in this book that I read about Margaret Atwood is that if you're reading this book and you're like, oh, like none of this could ever happen, like, which is definitely how I kind of viewed it going in, like it reads kind of dystopian, but she said herself, like, she didn't include anything in here that hasn't been inflicted on women sometime in history. Like, that completely shifted my view on the book. It was really made me think so hard, and this book was just phenomenal. It's basically kind of about a futuristic America called Gilead, and it is very religious, like very much been taken over by a religious group, and that suppresses women by taking like unmarried young women or poor women. Only women who don't really have to do this are wealthy white women. So poor women and women of color become handmaids. Handmaids are basically recruited by these wealthy families to produce offspring for. It follows this one woman, Offred, who did have a life before this, who lived like everyone else, and now she's living this life, and she has a son, and it just kind of follows her journey through living under this oppressive government. It was just an amazing book. I think this is one of those books that everyone should read in their life. So now we have gotten to the honorable mentions. This one was really hard for me to narrow it down, but I have 3 honorable mentions for first place and then my first place. My first honorable mention is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands. I couldn't stop yapping about Emily Wilde all of March, April, May, pretty much. All of spring was Emily Wilde's time to shine. When I talked about how my reading taste has evolved, this is what really shifted my brain chemistry. Out of all the books, this one is the one that like just really shifted me, because I didn't think I really liked cozy fantasy until I read this book. Like, this book was just so much fun. It's basically the Emily Wilde series. She studies fairies and fae, and she's basically making an encyclopedia on the first one. This is the second book. The first one, she's finishing up her encyclopedia, and she goes into this small little town to study the last bit of fae that she needs for her encyclopedia. And this one, she's concocting a map of the other worlds, like the fae realm, and both of them are phenomenal, honestly, but this one was just even better for me. Like, it's really fun because they breed kind of like academic journals. Like, it's kind of like a journal, and I really like that. Also, what really makes these books for me though is the characters. That's what makes these books, because the fae in these books are just so funny. Like, I think they're not like Rhysand, which we love Rhysand, but they're not like that kind of fae. Like, they're the mischievous, like the kind of tricksters kind of fae. And I love that because like they're so sneaky, so kind of funny, and they say just like really funny things, to be honest. Then Emily is just such an introvert, just wants to be in her studies, wants to be left alone with her books, and I relate to her so hard. and I love her very much. She's so like sarcastic and just like snarky because she doesn't want to be around anyone. And then there's Wendell, who is her begrudgingly partner in all of this, but he's just so golden retriever. He's so funny. Like, he's there whether she likes it or not, and I find that hilarious. This book just really changed how I view what I like in fantasy, and I just really loved it. I had so much fun with this. And I think about these books quite often. Like, I completely shifted my aesthetic of my life to kind of center around these books. And then the next book is another one I seem to have lost somewhere, but it is Lovely War by Julie Berry. Gosh, I love this. I love this book so much. Like, I truly adore it. This book was one that had been on my TBR for probably like 4 years. I was like, okay, I gotta read this. And then it was like, why have I never read this? It was the most unique concept I've ever read. It's basically a love story in World War I, and 2 love stories in World War I told through the lens of the goddess of love, Aphrodite. First off, these stories that were both told were so incredibly mesmerizing and heartbreaking and wholesome at the same time. Like, they were just so in love, and I could feel the love through the pages. Also, what I loved about it is it was kind of told as like a play. Honestly, this book is hard to describe. It's hard. You kind of just have to read it to see what I'm talking about. But having a story told through the lens of Aphrodite made it just so romantic. I just can't rave about this book. Like, it was probably the most beautifully written love story I have ever read, I think. And I really do not say that lightly. And it was just such a gorgeous love story, and the writing was beautiful. The interconnected stories were beautiful. It was just so perfectly written, and there's not a single thing I would change about this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. Okay, I've got to get going. It's getting like dark, like outside. It's only like 3:30. I don't know what's going on. I was like, I sat down, I'm like, I have plenty of time with the sun, but it's looking pretty drab and dreary out there. We got 2 more to go. We can finish this up. So this one and the last one I sat and stared at for a while. I didn't know which one I was going to pick, but ultimately I think I made the right choice. Honorable mention, second place, first runner-up, is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This book took me half a year to read, not gonna lie, but it was a phenomenal book. This book is the second one in the Stormlight Archives, and is what kind of sold me on this series. Sold me that I should be investing countless hours reading 1,000-page books. This one I adored. Just the character development, like, I truly fell in love with all these characters in this one. I did reading vlogs of The Way of Kings. I'm sure you heard me yap about how much I didn't like Shaolin. I take everything back. I love her in this book. She's my girl. I think her character development was truly phenomenal throughout this book, and I feel like I understand her a lot more. Especially, we get a lot of like her background in this book, which I really enjoyed. Also, the magic system in here is just genius. There's no other way to say it. It's just truly genius what he has concocted in these books. It's definitely slow in places. It's definitely a journey to get where we're going, but it's always worth it when we get it. Like, when it finally like clicks, I'm like, oh, like, this was beyond like what anything my mind could have cooked up. I think this might be one of the best fantasies I've ever read in my life. It was so good. I don't want to talk too much about it. I'm not going to like go into like what the Stormlight Archives are about, because we'd be here all day long, but I really do recommend the series. I don't know if I'd recommend The Way of Kings as like the first Brandon Sanderson you read. You can if you're ambitious. I'm just not that ambitious. It's just a lot to start off to like introduce yourself to the world, and I think that reading like some build-up made this a lot more enjoyable for me. But overall, I really did love this book. This is what I read when I finished my finals, and I was like, okay, this has got to be done by the end of the year. Like, I've got to do it. And I sat down, read the last 500 pages, and I was enthralled. I could not put it down. And the main character, Kaladin, it was so cool to like watch how he kind of came into his own. Like, there's so many questions that got answered in this book, and it was just genius. I love this book. I love this magic system. I'm so excited to continue on with the series, but I had to include this as in my top books. Okay, so what's going on with my hair? So after long and hard consideration, this might come as a shock to people what my favorite book of the year was, but I couldn't pick anything but this book. My favorite book of 2024 was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna might be my favorite author of all time. I've read 2 of her books, so maybe I shouldn't say that. Words can't even describe how I feel towards this book. I read The Nightingale a couple years ago and I had the same feelings I did towards that one that I do this one, and I was like, you know what, like I need to read more of her books because I love that one so much. We'll see how I feel. This book really cemented how much I love Kristen Hanna. It basically follows this family, and this dad, he's like a war veteran. He got very messed up in the war, in like the Vietnam War. Like he's not the same as he was when he left, and now he's back. They're very poor, and he has very violent PTSD, and he's like, you know what I need to get out of the city. Let's go to like rural Alaska. The mom is, it shows kind of like the codependency, and like the mom is like, all right, like I gotta do what's best like for my family. So they move her and their daughter to remote Alaska. And then it follows Lenny like navigating her parents' very tumultuous, very stormy, dark relationship, and now that relationship is now being moved to the middle of nowhere. So it follows them, and then the winter, Alaska winters, and Lenny and her mother soon realize that their idea of going to Alaska as winter is approaching, 18 hours of darkness, cold, not leaving the house, might not have been the best idea. However, what really stood out to me about, I'm like hugging it, what really stood out to me about this book is when they moved to this town, it's probably a town of like 30-40 people, but I loved how Kristen Hanna wrote these women who just take care of each other. And I don't think Lenny had ever had that in her life, and she never had true friendship either, which she also found. And I just loved the connections they made. I loved how we saw the women helping other women, and just watching Lenny grow up in the Alaskan frontier with this tumultuous family, watching her navigate it, watching her evolve and come into her own. It was just a beautiful, heartbreaking story. And I think that's what I love about Kristen Hanna. I think her storytelling skills are just so unmatched, and the way she understands and writes about human connection, female connection, is just so unmatched to anything I've read about in my entire life. I cried so many times during this book. Happy tears, sad tears, all the tears. And it kind of takes me a lot to cry with a book, and I was sobbing through a lot of this, and just because it was so beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. This book holds such a dear place in my heart. I'm so excited to read more of her books. I need breaks in between her books because like I just need time to digest them, but it was just phenomenal. It was the only choice for the top book of 2024. So those are all my books. Those are the books, my favorite books of 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. I loved filming this because it was fun to look back on all the great reads I had in 2024. It's so excited this time of year because it's so reflective and so nice just to look back and be like, wow, like read a lot of great things, and it makes me so excited for what I'm going to be reading in 2025. Also, I am always looking for some recs, so let me know what your favorite books of 2024 were, and maybe it'll be on the 2025 list next year. But thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to see any other videos from me, please let me know in the comments below. Also, thank you guys again. I know I said this in my vlog, but thank you guys so much for bearing with me through my tumultuous December where I was very much on the struggle bus, but I'm back to posting. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me. I appreciate it more than you know, and I hope you guys had an amazing 2024 reading year, and I wish you the best on your 2025 reads. I hope you guys have such a fabulous day, fabulous week, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!